Welcome back to another episode of The Gentleman's Journey. I'm Jack Bell, and I'm joined here today with Rich Kauffeld of Alpha Psi. I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit.
I'm Rich Kauffeld of Alpha Psi. I'm class of '80 at Cornell, and I'm the president of the Alpha Psi Corporation of Chi Psi at Cornell.
Nice, we're glad to have you here. Let's begin at the beginning. What was your first experience with Chi Psi, and what did it look like back then?
Well, to really appreciate my first experience with Chi Psi, you have to know that I come from a low to middle class background.
Okay.
First generation college. None of my many cousins had ever gone to a university. I was very smart, but I was also naive and not worldly at all. So when I showed up on campus, I had not been on a major university campus. I had not stayed in a hotel before. I thought there was public school and Catholic school. I didn't know what a prep school was.
Okay.
So the first day was a real eye-opener. And I was fortunate that my resident advisor, Steve Follett, was a Chi Psi in my dorm. My roommate was my best friend. We were co-valedictorians in high school and went to Cornell together. When we went next door to the pub, which was the bar for the freshman dorms,
Okay.
the bartender, Tom Sennett, was a Chi Psi. Two young guys came on, very talented, and played guitar and sang. They were quite good, both Chi Psis. So I got invited over to Chi Psi in my jeans with holes in them and with my long hair and a little underdressed to this impressive lodge with diverse brothers, many from prep schools that I had never heard of before, many athletes on Big Red teams, and they were just so impressive. And they cared not about how I was dressed, they cared what I had to say, what my values were like. So my first experience was eye-opening. I never rushed another house, and I pledged Chi Psi that spring.
Yeah, here you are today. It's really cool to see how one chance occurrence can lead to something down the line.
Yeah. And by the way, I went to a Phillies game just 3 weeks ago with my best friend, brother Matt Adler, Steve Follett, who was my RA in that freshman dorm, and Jeff Gailey, who was one of the two guitar players.
Wow, that's really awesome. My next question, what brings you back to convention every year and so involved with the fraternity?
So for years, I didn't come to convention.
Okay.
I was living overseas, raising a family. This is my 7th convention now, and I do come back each year. It's the best opportunity of the year to network with our brothers from other alphas, by far. It's important for the governance of our fraternity.
Of course.
And I like to come with our delegates from Alpha Psi. It's a great opportunity to spend 3 or 4 days with young officers that are so important to our success next year.
Yeah, experience from past leaders is invaluable to a current fraternity. And that leads me to my next question, which is, as a young alpha, as Alpha Phi Delta is that I'm in, we don't have a huge alumni base yet since we're so new. What advice would you give to alphas to help build those strong bonds of alumni to active? Because I feel like it's integral to a successful alpha.
As old as Psi is, as an alpha, we still have this challenge because Ithaca is not a place, Cornell's not a school, where there are tailgates every fall and there are alumni on campus all the time. So our brothers at Alpha Psi don't know that many alumni, so we have to work it pretty hard today. And what I would say is that you reach out and network. You have events to bring alumni back. We've made reunion a very important time to bring alumni back to Cornell, and typically you wouldn't have actives at reunion. They all leave after graduation or at the end of the semester and go to their jobs. But increasingly, we're having actives stick around on campus for the summer maybe, or just coming up for the weekend to get to meet more of the alumni. So I think it's about engaging at events,
Mhm.
it's about engaging around newsletters and things like that, and then just reaching out and asking for help networking for a job or looking for mentorship.
That's good advice. Obviously, you're super involved with the alumni relations at Alpha Psi. Can you explain a little bit to me what your role is like in that position?
Sure. So first and foremost, as president of Alpha Psi Corporation, we own the lodge. We have to maintain the lodge. The chef is our employee. We have to have a live-in advisor that is a semi-paid position. That's not an undergraduate or a graduate brother, but is someone that keeps an eye on things during the school year. So there's a lot to do just in terms of being a good landlord for the Alpha. Okay. In addition to that, I'm also considered by Cornell the lead alumni advisor for Alpha Psi. So I engage with the officers with the number one on a weekly basis. We have monthly calls with a handful of alumni and all the officers. Those calls are run by the Executive Council of the Alpha. We believe in strong self-governance. So this is not about the alumni telling the actives what they're going to do. We're on the call for advice. We're on the call to help handle problems. So those are the two main roles. And then the third thing would be engaging alumni and soliciting funds. It's important to us that we're not only a house of those who can afford to pay for fraternity in addition to what you're paying tuition at a school. So we have been growing our educational trust so that we can expand our scholarships year over year and make sure that any brother, any new member who deserves to be initiated as a brother of Alpha Psi will be able to afford to fully participate in all of our activities.
That's good. And I think that's super important because, finance is a true problem that a lot of people face when they're in undergrad. And it's unfortunate if that is something that makes them unable to enjoy them.
For those of us that remember the numbers from the 70s, it's amazing what it costs for tuition these days. And I did put my daughter through Cornell, so I know the numbers pretty well.
I'm sure. You help out with several Alpha Psi specific publications and programs, the first of which being Psi-Lights, which I believe is a newsletter. Can you explain that a little bit to me?
So the Alpha Psi-Lights has existed for decades.
Okay.
And the Alpha Psi-Lights was historically a newsletter that was put out by the actives with very little alumni involvement. When we lost recognition and when we were a colony, we as alumni continued to issue the Psi-Lights, and that was the newsletter that we used to let our alumni know how things were going and to solicit donations toward our renaissance. Now that we've been refounded, that things are going very well, and the actives self-govern the activities at the lodge during the year, we've created a second newsletter. So we still have the Alpha Psi-Lights, and the Alpha Psi-Lights is produced by the actives, and it focuses on what things are going on at the lodge during the school year. And then we have a second newsletter, the Alpha Psi Legacy, just like the Nationals Legacy, that we refer to that as by alumni for alumni. And the primary purpose of that is to engage the alumni and let them know what other alumni are going on, and then remind them that Alpha Psi is an opportunity for them to have a legacy type of impact and solicit donations and help with scholarships and help with capital improvements for the lodge.
For sure. I think just making sure that alumni and undergrads know that they're still a part of this is super important to maintain those relationships. The next program that I heard of is the Fred Young Sub-Millimeter Telescope. Can you explain that to me a little bit?
The feast. So we just happened to have a call last week with Brother Fred Young. And I think he is his story. He came back to Reunion about 20 years ago and met a professor at Cornell that had this dream of creating a sub-millimeter telescope on a mountain in Chile.
Wow.
So that it could scan the universe in a way that no other telescope can. Fred had been the CEO and president of Young Radiator in Racine, Wisconsin, and he had sold the business. And the sale of that business put him in a position where he could help fund this professor's dream. So for the last 16 or 17 years, Fred has been a big part of putting together the coalition of universities that decided to take this project on.
Wow.
And when the National Science Foundation actually reneged on some funding, Fred has very generously given to keep that program going. And earlier this year, the telescope was assembled in Germany where the parts were being made. It is currently being taken apart and then shipped from Germany to Chile, where it will be installed at 18,000 feet in a mountain desert, so that it doesn't have to look through any moisture as it gazes out into the universe.
That is really cool.
So yeah, the Fred Young sub-millimeter telescope is an amazing story. It will see first light sometime next year, which is a term used for the first time that you can actually use a telescope. It uses technology that has not been assembled in this way before. So it's a remarkable story, and it's a story about a brother who gave back to Cornell, and he's giving back to our understanding of the universe.
That's awesome, especially now that recently it's coming to light, which is really cool. And the final question I had that I heard of was the Memorial Garden. Can you tell me about that?
So possibly our biggest accomplishment over the last several years. I was on campus with some brothers for a memorial. A brother had passed, Steve Garcia, who probably more than any other alumni had come back every year for maybe 40 years. He was a huge football fan, and he was always back for the football games. And Steve passed, and for his memorial, a small group had decided that we were going to plant a tree at Sholkoff Field, right where Steve and Bob Grosso and members of the undefeated freshman football team from 1972, I think. It was where they tailgated for the football game. Well, this was an unofficial operation because we were planting a tree on Cornell property. So after happy hour, we organized a pickup truck and a tree and tools, and we planted that tree. And then the next day, as we were sitting under the tree at Sholkoff, toasting and telling stories about Steve, we realized that we should have a place at the lodge to remember our brothers, to tell their stories, to be able to gather, to remember all our brothers and not create individual memorials. So Bob Grosso was there, and we decided, he was a landscape architect, we decided that, okay, we were going to do this. This was during the pandemic, and we got ambitious and decided that we were going to dedicate the garden 4 months later on the 20th anniversary of 9/11, when, as you know, Chi Psi lost 4 brothers on 9/11. Cornell had lost 20-some Cornellians, and Alpha Psi lost a brother on 9/11. Mike Tanner, who was the quarterback when I was at the lodge. So over the next 4 months, we worked with a landscaper. Bob did the design work. We decided that the design of the garden should be essentially the badge, if you looked at it from a drone overhead. And we built the garden. We organized a ceremony for 9/11. We invited President Martha Pollock from Cornell to come and speak at the event. She attended. We had about 300 people on the 20th anniversary of 9/11, including Mike Tanner's family, who, after 19 years of going to remembrances at the towers, I think were glad to be up with his fraternity brothers on the front lawn of the lodge,
Sure.
remembering. And it, when we remember our brothers, we remember them for their accomplishments, but then we also tell some fun stories about them. And the Memorial Garden's been a real addition to the lodge at Cornell. It is the highlight of reunion weekend every year. Unfortunately, we memorialize some new brothers, but they'll never be forgotten, and we always have a place to tell their stories.
That is a beautiful full circle accomplishment and memorial that you pay for them. I think that's really awesome. My next question switches away from CASA a little bit. As undergrads are preparing to graduate and enter the business world, start their new lives as professionals, what advice would you have for them?
My advice, and appropriate advice as part of the gentleman's journey, is that life is a journey.
Yeah.
And you get one shot. And so you will be making trade-offs all along the way. So think about what you want to spend your time doing. Think about the trade-offs you want to make between the ultimate professional career and family. Think about how hard you want to work and when you want to take time off.
Yeah.
And for the journey, it's important to have good guides, mentors, parents, people that can help you figure out what would you like to do and what choices are you going to make. It's important to navigate yourself, make your own decisions. You have to have good values. To you will take wrong turns, of course. When you make a wrong turn, don't go too far down that path before you realize you need to turn back and go the right way. So, my advice is just be thoughtful, have a great time, reach out for help for family, friends, and brothers when you need it.
That's good advice. Really good advice. To wrap things up, I've been asking this to everyone. What has been your favorite CASA memory, if you could choose one?
So I have great memories of our pledging activities and our formals and all those things, but I got to go back. So when I was a freshman, the Grateful Dead played at Cornell in 1977.
Okay.
And it was an amazing time, and I went with a couple of my fraternity brothers. But it became a famous show. So years later, it's been 46